characters, their lives, and where they're coming from. And sort of those moments you use as internal dialogue in a way. You know, it's that idea that, you know, even in the most like silent moments that you can communicate, you know, 1,000 words. So I think it's a very strong and effective sort of technique.
Yeah, and again, the end result is just beautiful and breathtaking, and it completely, you know, invests you into every aspect of the story. Back to Dee Dee and Jeremy, I feel like the producers, you're kind of like, in the end, and as they craft these stories, you're the guys that sort of help foster that, which also means that you have to be the magicians in a lot of ways to make the budgets and the locations and everything work. So on this one, I want you guys to maybe tell us one of those moments where you didn't think something that Barry asked for was gonna work out, but like the blessing still happened, the miracle still happened, you secured the location, this person's schedule became available to where you were able to bring something that you thought you weren't going to in the film actually onto the screen.
I don't know, I mean, it's more like, what do you want, Barry? And then we'll go kill ourselves to get it. It's sort of a jujitsu act, but it comes from the heart. I mean, we were, you know, there was a hurricane in Puerto Rico we were supposed to shoot, and we had to pivot really fast and move that. Obviously, we wanted to shoot in Harlem. It was incredibly important to everyone that we do that, to honor Mr. Baldwin. I don't know, we're just lucky to be a part of it. Honestly, that's how I feel. Like, I think Barry is one of the great humanists and one of the great storytellers of our time. And so to be a small part of it and to create the space for him to find Kiki and Stefan and Nick and everyone else who got involved, that's a privilege. We feel very privileged.
One more little detail. So getting a day for Brian Tyree Henry out of the Atlanta schedule, he worked for, it was one day's work. That incredible
so
scene
good.
between Stefan James and
Yeah.
him, and that was logistically challenging because of the demands of that schedule. And that was an example of what Dee Dee said about, you know, really going the extra mile to get Barry the things that he needed. But I remember that, like, I'm so happy that he pushed and that we all pushed, because you guys got to experience that incredible, almost mesmerizing, what the hell is that scene? It's so unbelievable and so strong. So that was a little bit of like a production.
No, that's a great example, again, because, like, let's be honest, that's like hitting a home run if you only get one at bat. So it's amazing that that was done in one day. Speaking of that scene, Nicholas, I want to talk to you about that scene because, again, your score just plays throughout this film and it's amazing, but I really love what it does in that scene in particular. So I just want to ask you on this one, if it wasn't that scene, what was the one that maybe Barry gave you the most notes about? Like, which was the one you had to work really hard to get to that magic moment?
It's a great question. I think Barry's always very clear early on, right when we're starting the work, where there are certain scenes that are going to be tricky, and he's like, "That's going to be tough." So just keep that in the back of your mind. And actually, one of the really tricky sequences was when Fonny, the sequence where the camera is spinning around Fonny while he's sculpting with smoke in the air, and there are a lot of ideas, I think, in the process where you actually can't figure them out until you figured other things out. You know, so in that sense, it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle where as you lay the groundwork for certain things, then all of a sudden other ideas kind of reveal themselves. So that was that scene, but the sequence that you were first talking about with Daniel and Fonny, that was really a breakthrough for us because in the beginning, there was the Miles Davis Blue and Green that was playing on the record player. And in the beginning, when I first saw the sequence, that's how it was, you know. And I had written a lot of the music, which really felt like it symbolized love and joy. That was the music with the brass and with the strings, really, which the strings, I didn't say that before, but the strings was the thing that was missing from that brass piece in the beginning. And once we started exploring strings, we really explored that feeling of love in all its forms. But what actually happened in that sequence with Daniel and Fonny was we discovered The Sound of Injustice, which was actually taking the music. I took elements from the piece that's playing that I had written for the sequence where Tish and Fonny first make love. I took the cellos and I actually bent them and distorted them. And Barry said to me, you know, how do we break them? And so I took the sounds and I actually lowered them in a way so it almost sounded like this really terrifying rumbling and kind of a grinding sound. And as the Miles Davis, I start to run it through this very long tail reverb, so it starts to change its sort of feeling of your perception. As that's happening, you start hearing this sound that almost starts emerging kind of from the floorboards, and that's literally the music of love that has been distorted into this sound of injustice.
Okay, I just have one more. I think I'm right on this. Is the score out now where people can listen to it? Okay, good times. Because I'm like, we all need to go right now and listen to it. Just because I'm already like, I have to hear it again. I'm gonna ask one more question and then I'm gonna throw it out to you guys if you guys have any questions for the cast and the filmmakers. Again, they've spent a lot of time trying to bring this beautiful film for you guys today, so please ask them about it. They have tons of stories and information. Kiki and Stefan, I'm going to borrow this one actually, which was a great audience question from last time. Obviously, as you said, this is an adaptation. It's a 20-hour book, a 2-hour movie, so there's going to be some things that don't make it. What is the one that you wish would have made it to the screen? What's that scene that you were hoping would make it?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, obviously you can't take everything from the book and put it into the film. The scene that I missed the most, and I actually argued with Barry about this after I saw the film, was the scene where Fonny brings Tish home and asks to take her hand in marriage. He has to marry her, and you know, to me, I just thought that scene was important because it showed like, I don't know, this like young man who was struggling with you know, wanting to be respectful and you know, knowing what he's done and knowing that he's had you know, Tish out this late and to bring her home and to say, well, listen, you know, I'm taking her from you now, like it's gonna be my woman, you know, my wife, and I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with her. I think that that's just so exemplary of their love, this true love between soulmates that's existed since they were children. And yeah, I think that, you know, hopefully you guys got the sense of that even without that scene in the film. So yeah, that was mine, if anything.
Mine too. Regardless of whether or not it's included in the film, obviously the reception has already been amazing, from critics groups to the Golden Globes to the Critics' Choice Awards. I mean, and everyone is just loving this film. Kiki recently got Best Newcomer for the Philly Critics. The film was nominated for Golden Globes for Best Drama. Nicholas, you racked up I don't know how many critics and nominations for Best Score. And outside of the film, Steven, you're getting a Golden Globe nomination for Homecoming. So before we do anything else, I just want to make sure that everybody appreciates the, you know, just the reception that this film has gotten. I'll throw it out to the audience if anyone has a question. Okay, right here, sir. Okay, his question was how the cast came together and for the actors of the film, how you found out that you got the role.
Barry Jenkins. We could just answer every question. Barry Jenkins. Barry, and I think you see this in Moonlight as well. He's very interested in people who are brand new and you've never seen. He's also interested in people with whom he's had a long history of viewership and admiration. And he doesn't know which part is going to be someone you're very familiar with and which part isn't. He waits and navigates that and sort of puts it together. I remember vividly Stefan being cast, and then this long, beautiful journey to find Kiki. And I'll tell you a secret. We did a table read in Brooklyn before we started, and I have a piece of paper of the script, and Barry leaned over and wrote, "She's going to be so amazing." And I saved it because I'm going to frame it for him. But you know, you don't know. I mean, that was true on Moonlight too. We thought, oh, that'll be a name, and that won't be a name, and then it flips. And it's very instinctive, and he waits. He's very patient. But he's pulling from feeling, and he's also pulling from familiarity, and he's pulling from